Hello, friends. Welcome to Changing Tracks. We have Father Luuk from Ireland here today with us. How are you? You're very welcome on our program.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can you tell us where you're from, where you were born? Maybe you can introduce yourself a little.
I'm Father Luuk Jansen. I'm originally from the Netherlands. I grew up in the Netherlands. I have a brother and a sister and my parents. We lived up in the north. And the north of the Netherlands would be a part of the country would be predominantly Protestants, mostly Dutch Reformed, although there was different Protestant dominations there. There wouldn't be that many Catholics around. I don't think I knew any Catholics growing up, although I learned at a later age that my grandmother actually became a Catholic at a later age, but I only discovered that a couple of years back. I went to what we call public schools, and public schools would be, there wouldn't be any religion at it. No, public schools is kind of used in English language as most schools, but those are the schools that don't have an element of religion. Opposed to Christian schools, as we would have called them. That also meant that while growing up, I would never have had a religious education in school.
What happened later on? Did you go to the university? What did you decide to study?
I finished secondary school, I went to university, I did mechanical engineering, and everything was going very well. My study was going easy enough. I had a job on the side, so I earned enough to have my own car and freedom. Went often out with friends in the weekends, driving around the north of the country, going to different nightclubs and things. So things were good and pleasant, and I wasn't really aware that anything was missing.
When did you realize, when did you discover that something else?
So what happened was, after I finished my degree, I was about to finish my degree, I had to do a 3 months practical placement to go to a company and do a 3 months project, write a thesis about it, and that was my bachelor finished. I was supposed to go with Philips, and I was trying to get into the Philips masterclass afterwards, and they had a factory in Mexico to make televisions, and there was a group of engineers going over, and I could join them. So I thought it was a good adventure for 3-4 months, so I accepted that proposal, that opportunity. However, just before in December, and I was supposed to go the 1st of February, when the details were discussed, they couldn't give me a specific project to do, and my supervisor didn't think it was suitable just to go over and see what would happen, because there might not be a suitable project, which would mean that I couldn't graduate. So they rejected the placement. Now, because I was going to go to Mexico, one of the teachers who was in contact with the research office in the GMIT in Galway asked there if they had a research project for me, and they said they would have one. So another student, a friend of mine, he was going over as well to work with a pharmaceutical company there, and we decided to go over together, and that gave me the possibility then to graduate. So I came to Ireland. I did 3 months of my project. I finished my project, and while I was there was one of the teachers that had close connections with one of the companies in Galway, and he suggested that I could maybe do some work for them. They do, the GMIT, the research office, does research for companies, and I can apply for scholarships. So we agreed that I would try and apply for a scholarship and do a master's to research in engineering. In the summer then I could work with this company and do some three-dimensional models, to do some tidy up on the models, because that's one of the things I specialized in, is three-dimensional design and strength calculations. So I decided to stay in Ireland for at least another 2 years to do a master's, And in the summer, after having spent some time at home, I went to this company, and in the company, the people there were very pleasant, very helpful, but they didn't really have much work for me. So I did some work, but I started to kind of look around, and because I was looking for a research project, I found something in the office there that needed to be researched, so in the product they're developing. But I also met one of the engineers, and one of the engineers there, they started to challenge me on my lack of belief in God. So that is really when my whole life, I suppose, started to change.
What answers did the engineer give you? What were your reasons to not believe in God?
Well, I suppose I like a good argument, so I would just have started with him to, well, he challenged me on, okay, why don't you believe in God? And I would just go say, oh, there's no need. We have the Big Bang, that explains where the world comes from. We have evolution, that explains where we come from. We can explain a lot, or most maybe even, of the processes we see in the natural world. It seems to work all according to I suppose, rules and regulations we can kind of we can discover. And there doesn't seem to be a need for God. Because for God I always associated with some kind of power in heaven who manages everything, I suppose, to a certain extent, or some kind of a higher power we could reach out to if we couldn't understand or couldn't control our own lives, or couldn't, like I said, make our own happiness. But then he started to kind of turn it around, and he said, okay, but if this Big Bang, where does the Big Bang come from? So naturally that was a little bit of a problem. And that kind of brought us down a philosophical road that there has to be something outside time and space in order for time and space to start. And we know from Einstein that time and space did start, and that they are closely connected together, that there's a starting point of all this. So where does that come from? That needs to come from something. We also argued about the complexity of the world, the universe. The fact that this Big Bang had to be very precisely tuned in order for even simple elements to develop, to small planets to develop, to stars to develop, to galaxies to develop. That the parameters needed to actually make this happen are very, 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 very complex. And that we start adding them up, that it doesn't make sense to say that that they are a random example of chance, you know. So we went through that. We looked at all these variables, and I came to the conclusion that even if the Big Bang could start by itself, that the chance that it would happen by chance, just randomly, was near impossible. That it would take a lot of faith to believe in that, rather than what it seemed to be. If you look at all the factors, and you could talk hours on the material that is there, if you look at all the factors, it seems to be much more plausible that somebody actually wanted it to happen that way. And being an engineer, I could see it. I could see all these elements fitting together in a beautiful design that was made for a planet like we're living on to exist and to allow life to flourish. So from the point of view that I accepted, okay, there has to be something outside time and space which we cannot define from where we are, I suppose, something that has to be eternal, to the fact that it seems that the world is created in a very specific way, that this all made sense in the context of some kind of an intelligent being. So I suppose that opened my at least my mind, of intellectually, that opened me up to the possibility of the existence of such a creature.
So your mind was opened, but how did you reach that personal relationship with God? How did that encounter come about? What happened?
I don't really know. After all this, we kind of, I suppose, you can intellectually can reason all these things, but they're not necessarily going to make a change to your life. So there is then a further step needed. So my colleague kind of led me then, we looked at microbiology and all kinds of interesting things. But once I was kind of open to the possibility that it made sense if there was a creator who designed everything, then if this is true, then this God which is portrayed in the Bible seems to be a God that made sense in this context. So he started to look with me at the Bible. We looked at the history, we looked a bit at the Old Testament, but mainly at the Gospels about the story of Jesus. We looked at the historical facts, archaeology. Did this actually happen? How accurate are the sources? Do they describe what we actually know happened around that time? And if they all seem to be accurate, then we can assume that what is written in them is accurate as well. So by looking at external evidence, we can kind of see that the internal evidence that the internal facts should be trustworthy. And if that is true, then you have to come to the conclusion that Jesus is God, because it doesn't really make sense otherwise. We can talk about, we can look at all kinds of different ways about Jesus. I mean, was he a lunatic or was he mad? But people who are mad and lunatics can't work miracles and are not coherent the way he was. So looking at all these, I suppose these pieces of evidence again, I came to the conclusion, well, it seems to be very plausible that this person, Jesus, which is described in the New Testament, is God. And it makes sense in the whole context of what I already discovered, that this God created the universe. So my colleague then at that stage, and I was kind of progressing in my thesis, but these discussions, him being sitting on my desk for half an hour a day, weren't really helping progress. He was kind of saying to me, okay, but if this is a personal God, so it would only be fair if this God responds if we ask him to show him that he exists. So he bought me a Dutch Bible, and he asked me to read a little bit of the Bible, the New Testament. I started just the Gospel of Matthew, to read a little bit of the New Testament each day and to say a few prayers. Now there was a church on my way back from work, so I used to pop in for 5 minutes to light a candle and just to ask God, if he exists, please show me. And then I read a little bit of the Gospels in the evening. And it is with that really that started, I think, my heart started to recognize that there was something deeper. I always say that the scriptures really spoke to me in a way that you can't really describe, but it connected me in a way that was real and relevant to my life. At that time, I could read something in the evening, and the next day it would be relevant in the context of what would happen in the office or in my life. And for me, that was a clear sign that God was showing, like, well, this is real. I mean, this is relevant. I can remember instances where, for example, I would be waiting for, I can remember one instance anyway, that I was waiting for a piece of equipment, and it was really kind of slowing down my work, and I was waiting for it for a week and a half too. And I prayed for it. It was a nice day. We went for a walk, passed by the church. So I went in and said a prayer very quickly to ask God to sort it out. And once I was back at the office, there was a message on my phone that it had arrived at the shipping department during break. So it was all kinds of small little coincidences that kind of showed me that, yeah, God does actually exist. He is in my life, and I can kind of get to know this God. And I suppose that is from there on then the life of prayer kind of started. So I started to go to a prayer group, learned the rosary, learned about the Mass, and that is where I really started to deepen my understanding of God.
In this whole process of drawing closer to God, did you notice that the Lord asked you for more, like being baptized, being a priest, or converting? Was there something like, Father Luuk, you have to do this,
Padre Luuk,
or
tienes que hacer esto.
anything like that?
For me, what happened was I knew this was true from God showing me in the small little miracles, from getting a sense occasionally of prayer and God's presence maybe, but it wouldn't be that often. And I suppose from my intellectual journey too, and my study of then a little bit of theology, even was on a simple level. I mean, the decision is a little bit like Pascal's wager. I mean, if this seems true, then why would you not engage with it? Because it brought a lot of... being a Christian doesn't change our lives. Now, for people who have brought up believing, it's maybe not that obvious, because our faith speaks to us and it gives us our hope, it gives us direction, it gives us peace, and all these kind of things. We don't really realize that we have them. But if you come from not having them, certain virtues, and especially theological virtues, then once you get them, you kind of realize the differences it makes. And I suppose I got at a stage that it was actually, I can remember what the instant was, there was a mass with the prayer group I was going to, and one of the people there told me, well, I couldn't go up to receive. Well, I wouldn't have known that, because I wasn't told. But for me, that was a point, I suppose, well, I believe this is Jesus. And I believe this is true. So the only thing I could do was really to be received into the church and start the process of being received as an adult. There wasn't really much option because I knew it was true, and I couldn't really just ignore it because it just made so much sense and made such a difference to my life.
What was the day you were baptized like?
Interesting. I went to a retreat the weekend before. It was a U2000 retreat, and I came back absolutely tired. And I can remember going to the baptism, and to be honest, it was a little bit of a haze in a way, because obviously you have to remember what you have to do and these kind of things and the practicalities of it. And there were so many people there. It wasn't actually, it was outside, it was around Easter, but it wasn't at the Easter ceremonies. It was just because I was going to go home for Easter, and it was arranged with my parents, my family. And I just didn't want to cancel that. I suppose in hindsight I probably would have, because I appreciate the importance of it, not necessarily the moment of, but I mean the whole significance of Easter and being there. I would definitely have done it now, but at the time I wouldn't have that much understanding of the significance of a lot of things, because you have to learn so much. So it was at a different occasion, but there was a lot of people from the prayer groups and younger people in groups I was involved in Galway at the time. So it was a huge event and a lot of people. The thing that struck me most was I woke up the next day and I felt completely reborn. Completely different person. Completely refreshed and everything. And it was just such an amazing experience that I just thought, wow, I don't know what just happened, kind of thing, you know. So the baptism itself was, obviously I was baptized and I was received, and I got my first Holy Communion all in the one Mass. So, and it was a great celebration. But I can just remember that afterwards it was just such a difference. And to a certain extent you kind of, I suppose if you kind of think, oh, God is that active in somebody's life. And I never really planned to come to Ireland. I never planned to stay in Ireland. I never planned to do my research with the company I did it with. Looking back, there's a lot of things that kind of lined up for me to be there.
After baptism, you decided to become a priest. What was that process like? From baptism into your decision to become a priest? What happened?
Yeah, I lived for about 5.5 years in Galway in total. I lived for about 5.5 years in Galway, so about 4 years as a Catholic, I suppose, 4 years. The first thing I realized was how difficult it is to live as a Catholic. It's very easy to be a comfort. it's not very easy to accept that God can be completely silent in your life. After not having experiences all the time and knowing God is there, but regular things happening, suddenly everything became very quiet. And I have often said, so often if I have been talking to people, that I really kind of respect people who have been brought up in the faith and are faithful to a certain extent, recognizing how God works deep within us, because sometimes God can seem very, very far away, and we have to recognize how He works in our lives and how He speaks to us, how He prompts us and gives us direction. And that's not always easy, and we need silence and time and space for that. And I suppose that is where I had to learn to pray more. I started to go to daily Mass. I joined the Legion of Mary to do some apostolic work. Also tried to, I was already involved in a prayer meeting to deepen my own personal prayer, but I really realized that I have to learn to listen. At one stage I can remember, I went to Medjugorje with a youth group in Galway, and I thought, this was probably about 4 months after my baptism, and I thought, well, God is going to give me the direction of my life now. This must be it, or Our Lady is going to do it, you know? Being in this place of prayer, and so many people had come back to their faith, to confessions in Medjugorje, but nothing really happened. And I can remember that I was a bit confused at the end of it, because I just wanted to know what God wanted to do in my life, because I just wanted to do God's will. It was kind of simple enough that way. The road I was going on was just getting a professional life. I always felt called to get married. And at one stage, a little bit later, I started my own company, thinking that if it's God's will that it would be successful, then I could work some time to make enough money to support the family and ministry, and then hopefully have time enough to actually help other people to find God, because it has made such a difference in my life. I want to share with others. A day after we came back, like I said, it was difficult for me, and I was in tears at the last day. I met a girl, well, I met her before, but we started going out, and we went out for about 3 years. So for me, I thought it was, well, this is it. This is the way things are going, and things were going very well. Until there was a point, at this stage I had my own companies. He was doing the postgraduate primary school teaching, which is very intense study, especially around the teaching practices. And I was on one side of the country, she at the other, and there was a bit of tension. So she said she wanted to have a little break. And I never really seriously considered the priesthood, I suppose. Because I thought I'm just making this up. Because I came from the Netherlands, wasn't planning this, was converted, that doesn't mean that you have to be a priest. So when I was going out, I was perfectly happy. But at that moment I kind of said, well, God, if this is your will that I give my whole life to you, in the way of religious life, because I don't really have an association with the diocese here in Ireland, I said I would, if you want me to become a religious and a priest, then I think I'm free now. And I went to, there was the Legion of Mary Youth Conference in All Hallows. It was in June, beginning of June. And I can remember it started with the rosary, and at that moment it was clear for me that God asked me to do this, to try this, or at least it seemed to be clear to me. I just felt such a love for God that I just knew this is something amazing. This is way beyond anything I felt love for before or experienced in that way. And I talked to a Dominican priest, Father John Harris, there, and we talked for a long time, and he put me in contact with a spiritual director, a Dominican, in Galway, the church where I was going to Mass every day anyway. So I started talking to him and to Discern, and then eventually I joined. But it wasn't an easy journey, because 2 days later my girlfriend wanted to get back together, and it was a very difficult few months deciding what to do. And I suppose to a certain extent talking with people who are trying to find God's way in their lives, it's an experience that's maybe good because I know that it isn't clear always that God is asking us, and sometimes you just have to put out in the deep and trust. And for me it was at that stage, like I was convinced at that time that God was asking me this to do, or at least I was quite sure that there was something there. I just said, I just have to try this, because if I don't try it, it will always be on my mind. It will always be at the back of my mind that I should have tried it, or if there was difficulties that I said, oh, I've done the wrong thing. So we had to break up, and I decided to apply, and I went through the process. And I was just going to go for 6 months and see, and if it didn't work out, then it was that done then. But once I started to join the Dominicans in the novitiate in 2007, I started to really dedicate all my free time to prayer and spiritual reading, and I just really discovered God's love and depth of prayer. And from then on, I just knew that this is what God is asking me to do. Again, not it being easy all the time, but it was just confirmed for me that there's so much depth and there's so much to be done, that God was inviting me to take up, and was supposed to leave everything behind rather, and to follow Him in whatever way He wants me to serve Him. So that was in 2007. I made profession in 2008. Made solemn profession in 2011, then is it? 3 years later. And I was ordained 3.5 years ago as priest. So.
Father Luuk, thank you so much for being here with us today and for telling us your story. The Lord, I always say this, has a plan for each one of us. The problem is that sometimes we don't know how to see it right away. That's why, like Father Luuk says, it is important to have someone at our side. A religious sister, a religious brother, a spiritual director, a priest, someone who accompanies us. I don't want to forget today all the people who write us and might ask themselves why we don't answer everyone. We read all of your emails and they make me very happy. I'm very happy also to encounter people in secular environments, for example, at the movie theater, where people show their support and that we continue together in the battle. In the battle to follow God and to evangelize everyone. Thank you. Thank you for being there. Thank you.